Dr. Holtz-Eakin, yes or no, did the American Rescue Plan increase inflation?
Yes.
Was it predictable that the American Rescue Plan would drive inflation so significantly?
Yes. People said so at the time, notably Larry Summers, former Secretary of the Treasury, outstanding economist. History has given us examples just like the American Rescue Plan. In 1951, the U.S. economy was growing at 10.5%, quite rapid growth. Federal spending was increased by about 50%. That's roughly the American Rescue Plan, $2 trillion on a $4 trillion base. And inflation jumped by 6 percentage points that year. So you get the big fiscal stimulus and an accommodative Fed in that hot growth environment, you get inflation.
Thank you. Were the Democrats warned about these risks?
Yes. There were public comments made by people about how undesirable this was and how large it was. There was testimony. I testified at the Senate Banking Committee about the risks of the American Rescue Plan and made the points I made today about how it's the wrong time for stimulus. We're growing rapidly. It's too big compared to the problem. I have some issues with the design. It wasn't really focused on COVID-related fallout in the economy. And so there were lots of people who had expressed some concern over the scale and composition of the bill.
So Democrats passed the legislation they knew would likely drive the country into its worst inflationary period in 40 years?
I don't have any idea what the motivation is. The bill passed, and we've now seen the policy error.
And it's good to learn from our past mistakes.
It would be nice if we did.
In your opinion, I'd like to understand your definition of inflation.
Inflation is a broad-based increase in the price level, so the dollar price of goods and services broadly in the economy rising.
Okay, thank you. In 2021, President Biden's then Chief of Staff Ron Klein endorsed a tweet saying, "Inflation," and I quote, "is a high-class problem," from Jason Furman, a Democrat who was President Obama's chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. Inflation is a high-class problem. Doctor, doesn't inflation affect middle-income and low-income Americans as well?
You got a couple doctors.
I got a couple doctors. We'll start with you.
Yeah, certainly. In my written testimony, I pointed out that, if you look at the median income in the United States and you say 50% of it's going to food, energy, and shelter, that's a $3,000 tax on food, energy, and shelter at current inflation rates. That's a real loss in purchasing power for other purposes because you have to devote it to those core elements.
Dr. Taylor, would you agree?
Yes, I think the effects of inflation on the broad population are completely understated. That's why this 2% or whatever, I thought it was should be 1.5% before they chose 2. That's why I think it's so important.
Thank you. And a follow-up, in fact, according to several research institutions in the Fed, the inflationary crisis brought on by the Biden and congressional Democrats' reckless spending has disproportionately impacted low-income individuals. Shouldn't the Biden administration be forcing more help on Americans in need by actually addressing the inflationary crisis rather than minimizing the real pain inflation caused by their reckless actions? I mean, we can't fix a problem unless we first admit we have a problem.
I think we all know we have an inflation problem. The question now is what is the best route to fixing it? My own opinion is that the Federal Reserve is in fact correct when Chairman Powell said that this is the Fed's problem. We have a mandate for price stability and full employment, and the only way to get to full employment is to restore price stability. Within the Fed's strategies, I want to just note what Dr. Taylor said about the fact that the discretionary decisions thus far have left them way behind the curve. There was a large discussion about the uptick in inflation in the first half of 2021. They continued with their foot on the gas through the whole year and didn't begin tightening until early in 2022 and tightened too slowly.
I agree. Dr. Holtz, the Biden administration continues to claim that 70% of the increased inflation was due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Is that true? Big percentage?
You can find a window where you can make that true, and they did. It was 1 month earlier last year. But broadly, the inflation problem really did take root in 2021 prior to the invasion, and I don't think explanations that point toward an invasion of Ukraine as the problem of inflation are correct.
Well, I'm just looking at the facts. So if I understand the facts correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, when the president took office in January of 2020, 2021, inflation was at 1.4%. By December of that year, inflation had risen, right, to 7%, 6% jump. Kind of a big jump in my opinion. But the war in Ukraine didn't start till the following February. So those are the facts, right? I'm not distorting the reality, and I'm looking at the global picture.
That's right, and that was my written testimony as well.
So how much of the inflation is due to Biden's policies versus how much is caused by Putin's invasion of Ukraine? I mean, we have to start talking about facts.
So a crude decomposition is you put aside the invasion, which happens later. You compare Europe to the United States, as many people want to do. In 2021, European consumer price inflation rose about a percentage point each quarter, went from 0 to 4%. That's because they shared the same supply chain problems the U.S. had. U.S. inflation got well above 7%. And so there's part which is attributable to the impact of supply chain difficulties, but there's another part that is unquestionably excessive demand stimulus in the U.S.
Thank you.